So, thanks everyone for coming. It's a great pleasure to be here and a great honor, and thanks for the great organization today. I hope everyone is enjoying their days and having great sessions. And I'll tell a bit about me and about Karlis and how we started this research. I think it was in April. I was in Sydney doing another research, and we were talking with Karlis on Skype. He used to be my classmate in back several years ago in Riga State Gymnasium, #1. And we were talking, and he has become a real enthusiastic IT professional, and he's telling me about this new method that he's trying to implement in a state institution in Latvia. And I'm like, whoa, you know, I'm also a master's student, and I need to graduate, and I need a master's project. So I told him, well, looks like a real interesting thing that I want to research, and so several months ago we started doing this, and I will let Karlis talk a bit more about what are the issues that we are dealing with.
Okay. Oh, I was loud. Okay, here. Hello. I'm Karlis, and yeah, as Jānis mentioned, I'm really enthusiastic about this solution because my experience really has been for the last 4 years. I'm not really very experienced at that, but what I saw is with enterprise systems, with these big IT systems here in Latvia, in state institutions, is it's actually really just plain hard to create these systems, and there are several things that it's not just that we're making these enterprise systems that are huge and complex, it's also the whole process around creating them is really complex, and it involves, first off, here's the first point, well, the requirements. First off, we need to get this idea, this knowledge from the business, what we need to make, so these higher level requirements of you could call them market requirements or business requirements. Then there's the next level requirements that will be, you know, system level requirements, subsystem level requirements that would involve different types of people. So first off, we have the business people, then we have the business analysts that help them put their thoughts into technical specifications. Then the next thing would be you would have systems analysts that would put that information into specifications and requirements or user stories that, you know, the actual developer, the actual programmer would understand. So there's these levels of hierarchy in requirements. The next thing is, well, I already mentioned that, is that there are multiple external and internal stakeholders. So what I mean by internal and external is that really the internal stakeholder would be the business, the client that requires this new information system built, and then there would be the external developers that they would outsource. They would contract them to develop this software for them or information system, and yeah, the third thing is really that, you know, since it's this. I wouldn't like to call it a chaos, but there's just a lot of this cloud of information around us, and since there are deadlines going on, decisions have to be made, and oftentimes these decisions are made in, you know, with technical uncertainty, like, is this really feasible, is it not? But okay, let's try and do it. Or there's this semantic ambiguity, which means that, you know, maybe someone in the business said something, the business analyst understood it one way, then the systems analyst understood it in a completely other way, and yeah, so communication is a big thing for these projects. So yeah, just translating these three things into the next slide. So first off is we lack traceability, you know, in the vertical line of these requirements. You know, the upper level requirements, those will be detailed in system requirements, and then those will be detailed in subsystem, into test cases, so on. And we need that traceability, and that's one of the things. Ineffective communication. Since there's a lot of things we have to, first off, we have to create these requirements, get this knowledge, then we have to review these requirements, which adds more information to that, and then we need to have approvals. We need the management people, the actual finance people as well, and there's quite a few people that are involved to give these approvals, and oftentimes, like, say someone will send you an email about something, asking, you know, whether this thing is correct or incorrect or whatever it is, but it actually in this email it wouldn't give you the whole picture. It wouldn't give you the related requirement. It wouldn't give you the related test case or the discussion that's been going around this this question asked in the email. It would be just a separate thing. So lacking context oftentimes. And third thing, which regards to making decisions, is just the visibility into the actual project status. That's what's going on right now. Where are we at? How we you know, scoped everything? Have we looked at all the requirements? Have we reviewed them? Have we approved them? Have we run our test cases? How far are we with that? And it takes time to create these reports. And so it takes time to do that, and hence the delayed decisions here. So the next picture is really, really something that we see, and that's just because of the complexity, because of the whole process being so packed with all sorts of information from many stakeholders. So it really is emails, it's documents, it's Word documents, Excel documents, and maybe you have some FTP server as a repository or whatever it is. But then you have an issue with versioning and who commented what and so on. So it's really dispersed. There's no single like repository for all this thing. So yeah, the idea behind this bit really that when we started talking with Janis is, hey, here I have this solution that I think is a better way to do things, but that's just my opinion. And he told me he's doing a research, so maybe we could come together and see for this example that maybe we can actually prove that this is a better way of doing things with this solution. And that's when Jānis came on and told me that, okay, let's look at this from an academic perspective, of a research perspective, not just with, you know, me saying that that's the best way to do things or whatever.
So yeah, so when I came in, we were at the point that we have to start implementing the solution and basically compare if it's better than the existing solution they have. So we draw up a research objective, which is to capture and analyze and evaluate the difference between this existing, the legacy process, and this process that is leveraged by a modern ALM solution. And so that brings us to the research question, which is what are the differences in this change management? And so so basically to compare these two processes, so we have to go through them, through the existing, and see if the new one is better or not, and how do they stand next to each other. So what we did, I started off with some literature review. I must say immediately there's not much of peer-reviewed academic literature on these kinds of topics for several reasons. Firstly, because there are very few people publishing on implementing and maintaining systems in the government sector. A lot of literature is about software change, requirements management, maybe not in the biggest projects, but this is a big bureaucratic state organization that have to apply to certain things ways of doing things. So literature review only gave us the theoretical framework, but didn't give us much insight into what I was looking for. So we came up with a way to do this, to conduct a case study. So basically, this study is a case study by design, and we decided to do things. So we have to discover the existing processes, and we have to validate the existing processes so we can see if using the new ALM tool might give a better result. So we have this state institution with several large IT systems, and what they do is they are maintaining their existing systems. So they are managing issues and change and feature requests that are reported. And they go through a fairly typical process for a state institution in Latvia. So they come from a request that is submitted through an evaluation that is often done in close participation with an external developer. And over time, then they update the documentation, they get the product, and they have to test it to see if they can go into production. This is what you see here is basically one of the first results is their existing process discovery. And what we immediately noticed is that there's a lot of communication that is done outside of their existing tool. It's just like calls, emails, maybe even just some informal meetings. But we see that all these red letters basically means that they are somehow communicating, and we are not sure where that information is stored and if it's stored. And also we see that there are so many different roles also. We see, I don't know if this works the way, yeah, I guess like it's this one. So we see external developer, systems manager, administrator, finance team, and we see management. And some of them use their own tools, and some of them are communicating with the systems coordinator that is responsible for this processing the request until it's done. So this is where we are at now, and Kārlis will tell more about this. But basically, we came from a conceptual model, and we see through process discovery how the request grows with information, and Karlis will tell more about what we see and what kind of items we get and information we get.
So actually the previous slides with the process is described in that schema there. That
you can go back there.
No, that's fine. Just to give you an idea of what that was. So first off, we start with a request. It could be a new feature request. It could be, you know, a report of an issue. It could be a change request. So we start off with the requester, just, you know, handing it in, just registering it in some sort of way, whichever it is. But so that's a bit of information already there that, you know, I need this to work differently than it does now. And so after that, you know, after communicating a little more with the people, that there might be some additional comments to that, additional questions around it, whether that's sent in an email or whether that's, you know, just communicated through, you know, just meeting somebody. But the next thing then would be you would involve, you know, the internal system admins, the operations people, who would have their input. So first off, we wanna check if that's not our own fault, and they'll tell you, you know, the servers are running well and everything's going well, so this is really a software problem. So that's another input, another piece of information that gets added to the request around the actual request, of all of the life cycle of the request. Then the next bit is, okay, we think this is something that the external developer should look at. So he comes in, looks at it, and maybe he has some additional questions about it, some additional details. He wants to know, how did you find it? What steps did you take to find this issue, and so on. That's additional information there. And then in the process, he would have to give an official response to say, okay, it looks like I have to do this. Will take this amount of money, this amount of time, and it will make changes there, and there. And then the next thing that adds up to that is the management needs to make a decision of, okay, what we are going to do now. Are we, following up and fixing this thing, or making this thing, or we just, leave it for later? If we make that decision, then the external developer has to, come with an official proposal of how we're going to do it, let's say, and they will need to present like, okay, this is exactly how we're going to do it, this is exactly how it's going to cost, and this is the time frame for that. And then we need three things again. We need the finance people getting involved there. We need the approval from the requester or from the business if the solution proposal actually contains the solution that he needed. And then there's another decision from the, the management, from the executive level, that okay, it all looks fine, we have the budget for it, let's do it. But that's another piece of information that's being, added to the life cycle of a request. Okay, then next up is the solution specification, and then there's some, quality assurance people that should write test cases for that, so we can test that later on. That's another information that's related to the request. We would like to keep track of that as well. Then there's the actual solution, the actual software, the code that needs to be, given to the client. And, well, then the next step is the installation, how we're doing with that, what's the status of it, have we finished it, so can we run the tests in our testing environment. So after we've tested, test results come in from the QA, and that's when there's, the final decision has to be made, like the third decision in the life cycle of the request. Okay, is everything fine? Can we go live? Can we put this program that they sent us in production? And that's it. That's the, final bit of decision there, and final bit of information that's kind of snowballed around the request. And so, if all this is really in a sort of isolated from each other, all these bits of information, it's really hard to keep track of it, and that's why we use a single tool where we could keep all that information. And the other thing is, which is probably even more important than just having a single repository, is about, like, this would represent our tool to keep track of things. But we would also need to integrate with the external developers tool. It could be Jira. We see that very often. We see TFS. It could be HP Quality Center, or whichever it is, and we use this synchronization technology that allows us to configure the mappings of how we want to do the synchronization, and that really helps us to keep it all in a single place, single repository, and have all that information I previously talked about in a single place where we can collaborate dynamically and see all the context that's around the request. Okay, so next up there's a few slides on how this system actually looks like. This will be an overview of a project that has been going on, so we would have some requirements or issues up here that contains the actual information of these artifacts. It could be the request itself, it could be the solution requirement that's been proposed, and you could have a relationship to that, so we can keep track of that. It could be you know, a test case that's related to this request and this solution requirement. It could be a defect in the end as well that we could synchronize over to Jira so the developers can fix that. So this is where all that information is, and we have live data, so to speak, that, okay, we have gone this far with the testing of these 5 requests that we had for this month. Like 3 of them have been accepted and tested and it's fine, 2 of them were still in the approval process and so on. But here we have the live sort of report of what's going on, what's the status of our system. And about communication, this is a screenshot from one of the discussions, sort of. So there's a comment that came from the client, you know, saying that, asking something and so on. And then there's actually this reply here isn't made in this tool. This reply was made in the external developers tool, and it got synchronized over. So each of those parties could use their own tool. They didn't have to, you know, start using 2 different tools now. Like the developer didn't have to go into this tool and then go to their own tool, whichever it is, and copy that information. He could just, you know, he received an issue, he received a defect, and he could comment on it, and the comment would be received here, and the business that posted the issue, registered the issue, could reply right there, and it would also be synchronized over. So, and the third slide I have here is from like a formal review of a solution proposal, and here it looks like behind these comments it looks like you know, just a normal document that could contain like these requirements of what we're going to do, specifications, and then there's just an example of how the communication goes on there, and really it's so what I wanted to with this research bit is that we wanted to see if this actually is better than what we did before, and from a qualitative perspective we can say that we have improved the exchange of information so that the context is always there. We really haven't measured anything, and Jānis will talk about that more, whether it's faster, whether it's more precise, and that's still sort of ongoing.
Right. So if you remember, the research question is about seeing what are the differences between these processes, and we see that now the collaboration is happening in context. We see that it's more focused because of that. It's a consequence that because of seeing all the context, we see that people are really communicating on the things that are important at that time, and they see the whole necessary information around them. We see that the communication is happening faster. We don't know how much faster yet, but we see that due to synchronizations or comments made in one place, we see an immediate impact on. So you don't have to wait till someone gathers a report. You get the data immediately. We see that it's all happening in one place, and we see that it's also the faster reporting that Karlis is talking about, that you can see the project status at any given time. And what I wanted to mention in conclusion section is that firstly, a requirements management tool like this can be adapted and used for maintenance of existing systems in a state institution. That means that it doesn't necessarily have to be a specifically for profit organization. It can be a large bureaucratic organization. However, we have to remember that there are some bureaucracy, some processes that have to be followed. You can't always completely redesign the existing ones. You have to identify the people that are really early adopters and deploy in small teams around the people that are enthusiastic about doing things in a new way. There will be some reluctance to change. It has been indicated during the focus groups that people are really not willing to immediately jump on a new way. And you have to have a plan. What are you going to do like 1 month from now, 2 months from now? And now, as we are continuing our research, we have to make quantitative measurements, which is we can measure cycle times now. We can basically compare how fast goes the previous process that runs on some of the systems and how fast goes the new process. So we see the whole cycle time from the request being submitted to request being closed. We can measure the descriptive statistics, so how much requests we get, how much are rejected compared to the previous ways. And of course we will gather qualitative input, which is to capture experiences. Basically through interviews, through focus groups, we can really see how do people perceive this new way of doing things, this collaboration and all these concepts. And maybe not in this, it's not the scope of this research, but this tool can be used for development of new systems, not just for managing the existing ones. So we also have to look at that. And yeah, I guess that's it for this research, and we will eventually publish the results as well. Thank you. And there are like 4 minutes for questions.
So, can you tell, does your methodology deals somehow with change management standards in IT field, in systems development field? So, with COBIT and so on, because of your research, we saw that you found a total mess of change management existing in state services. So what standards are you dealing with in your solution?
You mean?
I wouldn't certainly say it's a total mess. There is a way that they do things, and that wasn't the purpose of the presentation, but there is a specific way that they do things. It's just that what I meant by that is just that the information gets spread out all over the well, not all over the place, but it just gets spread out, and it's quite hard to get the whole everything that surrounds a single request, to get the whole of that information in one place. Yep. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't follow a strict process that would comply with a...
So what I understood of your presentation, that for example, if there was a lot of information exchange about requirements of the system, and this information was not timely and correctly communicated to the developers. So with your solution, all this mess of information will be forwarded to Jira system, for example, and what result you expect to receive from that?
It's really trying to, this solution is trying to get all that mess in a sort of a, and I want to repeat, it's not really that, we would call it a mess, but try to get it in a more structured way, more structured approach, how we structure all that information with traceability, with separating certain item types, certain artifacts like requirements, like test cases, like defects, and then the process would sort of delegate certain responsibilities, like for example, you mentioned the developers, Jira or whatever it is. We would only send in defects at that time, you know, after the testing has been done. And then there would be a process of how you deal with defects on the other side as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking about. You said certain responsibilities should be delegated to somebody, for example, like a single point of contact or something like that. Just all those things are already set up by certain standards. So what kind of standards you use in your solution?
John, well, I'm not really sure on what standards I should mention. It's certainly based on pretty much on Babcock style standard that it's been created, but really it's more about not about the standard, but it's more about like I think Jānis knows more about. But what I wanted to say is more about having everyone in the team, even the developer, the ability to see more than just the thing he usually receives. He has the opportunity to ask questions and ask it to the business as well.